Deebo Samuel, all-star Pro Bowl player for the 49ers. He requested a trade. All-pro player for the 49ers has requested a trade and has been given permission to seek that trade.
It wouldn't be a 49ers offseason without some player contract drama. And Deebo Samuel wasted no time coming out publicly on Super Bowl day that he is seeking a trade from the San Francisco 49ers, which they've granted him. The reasoning behind Deebo Samuel wanting a trade, again.
What was the biggest moment of personal adversity this year for you you had to fight through?
I went through a lot. Still want to be the player that I know I'm capable of being, but the opportunity was just not as big as I wanted them to be.
So, had to jump on here. Got to talk about this Deebo Samuel trade request. What's going to happen? The solution for replacing Deebo Samuel. So, back at it, talking 49ers football. Let's get into it, y'all. Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy, Ryan Tigey. I know the news came out Super Bowl day ahead of the Eagles facing off against the Kansas City Chiefs, that Deebo Samuel came out publicly stating he is seeking a trade from the San Francisco 49ers. Again, as we all know, this will be Deebo's second trade request from the San Francisco 49ers. The first one being when his contract negotiations were talking following his rookie deal. Deebo Samuel requested a trade from the 49ers. Ultimately, we all know the deal got done and Deebo Samuel remained on the team. So why is Deebo Samuel yet again requesting a trade? Well, according to him, as he stated on the Kay Adams show during Radio Row Week leading up to the Super Bowl, it's because
the opportunity was just not as big as I wanted them to be.
And when you look at it from a 49ers perspective, Deebo Samuel is coming off his worst season ever as a San Francisco 49er. His trade value has diminished greatly. Though with that being said, there are reports that teams are showing interest in a potential trade for Deebo Samuel.
What's the level of interest in the league around him? Phil, there's some interest. I just checked in on this. I was told that several teams have expressed interest. So at least preliminary talks on a potential trade have happened.
But it appears to be a lot more likely that Deebo Samuel will be released from the team rather than trading. A trade is still possible. Teams that I've heard rumors about potentially being interested, got the Denver Broncos, potentially the Las Vegas Raiders, maybe the Miami Dolphins with Mike Daniels. Maybe the Washington Commanders with Adam Peters now over there as the GM, who's always liked Deebo. So there are some teams that are interested, but we all know, just like the executives from other teams know, the San Francisco 49ers are going to move on from Deebo Samuel. This is it. Because what's the president the 49ers would be sending if they were to re-up Deebo on a new deal? A player who had his worst performance this past season through the team history, 29-year-old player who makes a lot of money, who's seeking a lot of dollars. The 49ers cannot set the precedent for other players that we will reward you when you've had your worst performance, when you've had a major decline over previous years. We're going to reward you with a new contract. The 49ers, they're not looking to do that. It's one thing when all these players every single year, what we've seen from the 49ers, wanting new money, wanting big deals. We've seen it time and time again, year after year with the 49ers, with hallmark players wanting new deals, and the 49ers have typically capitulated or been able to find some way to get a deal done. But that's when they were in the running and playing for conference championships. This past season, finishing at 6-11, was a kick in the teeth. And the actions that the 49ers are showing right now is there's a new reality check. They have drawn a line in the sand. They are not going to reward players for bad performances, declines, and not living up to their potential money that they've already been making and are under contract for. So this is a good thing. Now, with all that being said, you hear a lot about Kyle Shanahan and Deebo Samuel's relationship. They are tight. One could make an argument that back in 2021, Deebo Samuel single-handedly took over, got the 49ers to where they ended up in the playoffs. Ultimately, obviously came up short, but he secured the future for John and Kyle back in 2021. So there's a special bond there. Deebo Samuel has put a lot of good performances that he's given to the San Francisco 49ers organization. But what Deebo Samuel's doing by seeking this trade request, that's made it easy for the San Francisco 49ers. This was always going to be an issue. I've talked about it in other videos, Deebo's cap hit, the money that he's been making, how they've restructured his deal over the years to move around some money. This was all coming to a head. And with Deebo Samuel's down year in performance, the 49ers, they knew that they were going to have to move on from Deebo Samuel. So how were they going to do that? And it wasn't going to be necessarily easy for them to do without getting some tremendous blowback. Obviously, Deebo Samuel is loved in the locker room from the players, but also the fan base. Obviously, there's a lot of Deebo fans out there, although I will say this year I saw an uptick in just Deebo hate, which some of it rightfully deserved considering his lackluster performance. But for the most part, I've always been a big Deebo fan. He did not have a good year. That's without question. And so what this has allowed the 49ers to do is have a clean break. It makes it very easy for them because they're not the ones that are having to say, go out, do a media tour about why they're deciding to move on with Deebo Samuel. It's Deebo Samuel. He's the public-facing one that said he is seeking a trade, and that's nothing but good news for the San Francisco 49ers because it makes it easy for them to move on, which they have to do. The 49ers, they've gotten the best out of Deebo Samuel. One would argue that Deebo Samuel, this hybrid player of wide receiver running back, the 49ers, they're the ones that turned Deebo into that. He obviously has the skill set to do both, but how many other teams out there with coaches, when Deebo Samuel came into the league, would have had the ability to allow Deebo Samuel to build an offense that allows Deebo Samuel to go into the backfield and play wide receiver? What coach would have had the balls to do that? There's not that many out there. So one would argue that the San Francisco 49ers under Kyle Shanahan, they turned Deebo Samuel into the player that he's become and maximized his value. So not only is it good on Deebo for being able to have that skill set and that athleticism, but also for Kyle Shanahan to being the mastermind offensive play caller that he is in order to adapt to the skill set of your players, which we all know he does to a T. And one thing that I think is interesting is when you take a look at the past couple of off seasons, and we all know every year there's always some star player that is holding out during training camp and OTAs, vying for a new deal. We saw it last year with Brandon Aiyuk and Trent Williams. We also saw the 49ers give Christian McCaffrey more money. The prior years, Deebo Samuel, Nick Bosa. I think the 49ers have been unhappy with some of the contracts they've given out. In fact, Tim Kawakami, one of the main 49er beat reporter, he was talking about there are still people in the front office of the San Francisco 49ers that are not happy about how the 49ers contract negotiation went with Brandon Aiyuk, how publicly and bitter of a display it was, how much of a distraction it was that again clearly bled into the season as the 49ers went through it. And then of course what happened, he got injured and was unavailable, although he was still getting paid $30 million on average per year. But then you also think about Trent Williams, a player that's older, a guy that knew the 49ers needed him considering he's the top left tackle in NFL football. They need to protect Brock Purdy. He held out. It happened. He got a new bag. And then of course, he also was available for the vast majority of the season with injuries, personal reasons, all that. But then, of course, on top of that, third time's a charm, they give Christian McCaffrey, because he also didn't show up to OTAs, they gave him new money, averaging $19 to $20 million per year. And of course, he played in 1 to 2 games this season, and it was an absolute disaster, giving Christian McCaffrey more money and then for him not to be available whatsoever this past season. And that's what's hurt them. Now, specifically with Christian McCaffrey, I will say a healthy Christian McCaffrey is going to fill in the void or the gap of moving on from Deebo Samuel. I've done videos specifically on how Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey are essentially in a lot of ways the same player. Take that with a grain of salt. Christian McCaffrey is a better player than Deebo Samuel, but in terms of the utility, being able to line up in wide receiver, being able to line up in the backfield, they both can do that. Christian McCaffrey can be the solution for a lot of the void that Deebo Samuel is going to bring not being on the team. But when you think about it, what are the 49ers really having to replace? Obviously, Deebo Samuel, the utility, that will be hard to do. A healthy Christian McCaffrey can help fill that void. But when you just look at Deebo Samuel's production this past year, Deebo Samuel only finished with 796 total yards from scrimmage. 796 with 4 touchdowns. So there's people can't be out there saying that Deebo Samuel is going to be dramatically missed, especially when Deebo Samuel, he was the focal point of this offense when he was available and playing. He was the focal point of the offense. The 49ers were out their wide receiver 1 in Brandon Aiyuk, and everybody was assuming Deebo Samuel was going to be the guy to step up. Well, we all know that Juwan Jennings was that guy to step up, but Deebo Samuel had all the opportunities to be the focal point of the offense, and he was. He just wasn't productive. Another report came out that also Tim Kawakami was talking about. I saw Deebo Samuel dispute this on social media, that Tim Kawakami, based on the conversations he's had within the 49ers organization, they were frustrated and concerned about Deebo Samuel's weight. Throughout the year, there were times during the season where Deebo Samuel was 20 pounds overweight. That was a concern. So when you think about what Deebo Samuel did last year, not many total yards from scrimmage, barely any touchdowns, a guy who struggled with weight, which he's had a history of, somebody who wasn't effective in the run game, very ineffective in the pass game. He's got great hands, but the separation he lacks dramatically. It's not something he's been known for, being a route running savant to get that separation. But I guess what I'm getting at is replacing Deebo Samuel based on his last year's statistics. It's not going to be that hard to do. Other teams, when they're taking into consideration, when you think about the money Deebo Samuel makes, what he's most likely going to be asking for in terms of money. He's 29 years old, injury prone, not a true wide receiver one. Is he a valuable player? For sure. But are those teams going to know how to use Deebo like Kyle Shanahan would? I doubt it. And when Deebo Samuel was the focal point, missing key pieces, he was unable to capitalize on his opportunity. So the fact that he's been going around when he said that in the season, when that he wasn't getting as many opportunities as he would like, he got dialed up opportunities the following game. I believe it was the Rams game, primetime game at home at Levi's, and he dropped that pass that could have been a touchdown, that slant route that he ran over the middle, dropped the pass, and then that just became an absolute utter disaster. Following that, because Deebo Samuel was outspoken about him not getting opportunities. And then he gets dialed up opportunities, doesn't capitalize. Realistically, Deebo Samuel had one really good game. It was the Miami Dolphins game. When the 49ers, they were already out of the playoffs, so it doesn't really matter. The 49ers got the most out of Deebo. Deebo got the most out of the 49ers, and it's okay. And I think it's the right time for the 49ers and Deebo to go their separate ways. For Deebo Samuel to go get a new opportunity to go out there and play. And in doing so, the 49ers, they're drawing a line in the sand, sending new expectations, because when you look at the 49ers wide receiver room, because obviously that's Deebo's primary position, they got Juwan Jennings, beast, stud, under contract, all good. Ricky Pearsall, promising player, but still unproven. We saw, obviously, with the shit that went on at the beginning of the year, getting shot, all that. We all know the history of what happened with Ricky Pearsall. But is he going to be able to take that big second-year leap? Because the 49ers, they're going to need him to. Brandon Aiyuk, the true wide receiver one. He's coming off a massive injury. How is he going to be? Is he going to be back to normal? Is he going to take him a while? When is he going to be available? And then, of course, Cowing, who didn't really get any snaps at wide receiver this year. He had a couple, but didn't, outside of maybe one deep pass that he caught from Brock Purdy. We didn't see much of Cowing. So the 49ers, when you just look at their wide receiver room and who they have under contract, they're light in that room. At least until Brandon Aiyuk is back fully healthy, the 49ers, that is something that they're going to need to address this offseason, even more so with the fact that they're moving on from Deebo Samuel. So where are they going to go? Obviously, there's the draft coming up. News just broke. Kyle Shanahan, a coach who typically misses the draft, at least he did the past couple of seasons. He will be in attendance with John Lynch, again, setting precedent. The 49ers finished 6-11. He's going to be there because they have a high first-round draft pick that they need to hit. So the 49ers, they can obviously address a wide receiver in the draft. Will it be one of their first couple picks? I think there's higher priorities, specifically defensive line. We all know offensive line. So I think the 49ers are going to be focusing in wide receiver, specifically in the free agent market. Get a veteran wide receiver. There are players that are going to be available or are already potentially available. Guys like Devontae Adams, guys like Keenan Allen, proven vets that the 49ers could bring in and have an immediate impact and, of course, help the quarterback, Brock Purdy, get open. So I think the 49ers are more than likely going to address the wide receiver needs, at least by getting one veteran in free agency. And then, of course, when you just look at the draft again, I don't know about you guys, but that Super Bowl game, it just reiterated the fact that the 49ers need to stay on their track of getting a dominant defensive line. The Eagles absolutely dominated the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line. When you think about the Eagles, they didn't blitz one time that whole Super Bowl. And the fact that they were absolutely crushing Patrick Mahomes shows the recipe that the 49ers are already aware of. Obviously, the 49ers, since John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan have come in, they have harped on defensive line, defensive line, defensive line. Clearly that defensive line did not do great this past season, so they need to rebring their focus on getting a dominant defensive line like we saw in 2019 with Buckner, Armstead, and those boys. Because also, when you think about it, Nick Bosa, a guy who's still the highest paid defensive player in the NFL at $34 million, another guy who held out all training camp, all OTAs. I'm also curious about Nick Bosa as it relates to if the 49ers are happy with that. We all know Nick Bosa, he is a fucking stud. He is a super athlete, a super freak. That dude is one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL. There's no question about that. But when you look at his production that he had last year, and clearly the help that he was lacking and the fact that he needs help, obviously it's 11 players on both sides of the ball. But for guys getting paid $34 million, it's fair to say he did not play up to the money that the 49ers are making, let alone when you take into his guarantees. Not only is the highest paid defensive player on an average per year basis, he also got the most guaranteed dollars by any defensive player with $120 million fully guaranteed. So when you looked at the Eagles play and absolutely railroad and fucking dominate the Chiefs, I hope the 49ers put their sole focus on that number 11 draft pick with getting a defensive lineman. This draft is stacked with defensive linemen, and the 49ers need to take advantage of that. And again, the 49ers, they've already had this recipe. The Eagles, they've just shown what the recipe can look like when you get it right. Because rushing 4 players and having Patrick Mahomes having no time looking like men versus boys, that's a good sign for the 49ers that as long as they hit on their draft picks, the expectation coming up in this next season, the 49ers should be a fucking dominant force. So just had to jump on here, give my 2 cents about all this Deebo Samuel drama. It's early in the offseason, and yet it's already kicked off with players within the 49ers building not happy for whatever reason, even though the fact Deebo Samuel, what he's saying, not getting opportunities, is incorrect. But overall, the actions that you're seeing from the 49ers, they're showing and acting like what a 6-11 team should be acting like, being ultra aggressive, drawing a line in the sand, focusing more on performance. So I'll be back, but until my next video, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. You know the deal. Hit me up. Peace.